She gave her heart to a man who promised her the world.
He was very nice, very charming.
He made her feel special.
She's having all these butterflies. Everything's amazing.
But their fairy tale romance will be cut short.
She was shot in the head.
They found blood all over inside the car.
Was it a robbery gone wrong?
Her cell phone and her purse were missing.
This was looking more and more like a random crime.
Or was it personal?
She had met a woman that she was in love with.
She was starting to explore her sexuality.
The investigation will turn up a number of suspects.
It was an overwhelming case.
Things really started to go downhill.
And before the dust settles, another life may be lost.
We don't want to believe that the depravity that happened in this case was possible.
That Jekyll and Hyde type of personality.
It was love that killed her, in a way.
What are you doing? January 22nd, 2017. It's a peaceful Sunday in Yonkers, New York, a suburban gateway between New York City and the Hudson Valley.
Yonkers is a city of about 200,000 people, just north of New York City.
We're sometimes affectionately known as the sixth borough.
Yonkers area can be a little more urban. It's a melting pot, but it is genuinely a really nice place to live.
However, this morning, Yonkers resident Leonida Perez Casado is up nervously pacing her apartment.
She had woke up around 7 and noticed her daughter was at home.
Hey, you reached Diana. Leave a message.
Diana, it's your mother. Where are you?
Mom's calling Diana, not getting her on the phone.
Diana was 27. She was an adult. But this type of behavior was out of the norm for her.
Her mother got very nervous.
But Leonida feels a wave of relief wash over her when she sees Diana's car in the parking lot.
She goes to the parking lot and she spots her daughter.
She sees Diana hunched over and she thought, oh my God, look at this girl. I'm gonna kill her. I can't believe she fell asleep in the car.
Diana? What are you doing out here?
But Diana isn't sleeping.
She felt something wet, and when she looked at her hand, there was blood.
Oh my God! Oh.
She immediately calls 911.
Please, somebody help me.
Diana Casado had always been the heart of her family.
She was kind of like the glue, you know, the one that kept them all together.
Diana's father, her mother, her brother, they all said she brightened up a room.
But Diana had an especially strong bond with her mother.
Her mother and her were very tight.
She did everything with her, went to the salon, got their nails done, went to eat.
Her mom had just always really been her best friend.
And Leonida couldn't have been more proud of her daughter.
Diana, along with her whole family, originally immigrated from the Dominican Republic.
She came when she was around 16, 17.
For a lot of kids, that would have thrown them for a loop at that age, but Diana adjusted really well, and her parents were so proud of her.
In her new home, Diana had no trouble fitting in.
Yonkers has a high immigrant population. A lot of the population are Latino.
Her friends loved her. They said she was outgoing, she was fun.
She also had the discipline to work hard.
Diana had gotten a job at a restaurant near where they were living.
In fact, her mother worked at the same restaurant that she did.
She had a small circle of friends who also worked at the same restaurant. And that was her little family.
But as a young woman, Diana had more on her mind than hard work.
Diana was like a free spirit. She wanted to have fun.
So it was no wonder when she caught the eye of a handsome older man named Luis Alteret Rivera.
She was his waitress, and the two quickly hit it off.
Hey, I'm Diana.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing better now. How are you?
He was a good-looking man.
He started talking to her.
He was being very nice, open and friendly.
He said, you know, would you like to get together?
I would love to take you out sometime.
How's Friday?
They exchanged numbers and they ended up going on a date that same week.
Even though Luis was almost 15 years older than Diana, they had an immediate connection.
That age gap really was exciting for her.
He had a good career as a civilian working on a military base.
He has all of this extra life experience.
And he always made Diana feel special.
She thought he was the sweetest guy in the world.
It seemed like this was the one.
But in the spring of 2016, after spending nearly a decade together, 27-year-old Diana was yearning for a change.
You have to remember, she was a kid when she met Luis. She didn't really know who she was.
She reached a point in her life where she thought, I don't know if this is really what I want forever because I really haven't experienced anything else.
So she decided to make a fresh start.
She wanted to start over, do something different. So she took a vacation with her sister down to Miami. She was able to mix and mingle and meet new people, and she experienced new things. She felt like, you know what? Miami might be the place for me.
Diana and Luis went their separate ways, and she was looking forward to this new life in Florida.
But after only 6 months of living it up in Florida, Diana realized just how homesick she'd become.
She missed her mom, she missed her dad, she missed her friends. So she came back to New York. She went right back to work in the same place.
What are you doing out here?
But now, just a few months after returning to New York, tragedy has struck.
Diana Casado's mother discovered her in her car, bleeding.
She subsequently calls 911.
Over here!
When first responders arrive on the scene, it's clear what happened to her.
She had an apparent gunshot wound to the head.
But she is still alive.
She still had vital signs and was breathing.
And her love in New York to find herself again.
She was down in Florida for several months in 2016.
She was feeling like she didn't really know who she was.
She couldn't commit to Luis feeling like this, so they split up and she went to stay with her sister in Miami.
But it didn't take long for her homesickness to bring her back to Yonkers.
She felt like the grass wasn't that much greener on the other side, so back to Yonkers it was.
And she quickly reconnected with Luis.
Her friends wondered if they would get back together.
But now, Diana's future hangs in the balance.
Let's get her out of here.
Patrol officers arrived and confirmed that we had a female who was shot at the location. She still had vital signs and was breathing, despite a gunshot wound to the head.
She was taken to the hospital down in New York City.
While officers transport Diana's mother to the station to get her statement, detectives take their first look at the crime scene.
Diana had been seated in the driver's seat of the vehicle.
There was blood all over inside the car.
We surmised that the suspect shot her as she was about to get out of the car because she was shot close range and the trajectory was downward.
While detectives don't locate any weapons at the scene, they do find evidence to point to the type of gun that was used.
There was a shell casing inside the vehicle.
It was a .40 caliber.
They also take note of what isn't in the vehicle.
There was no pocketbook in the car. They couldn't find her cell phone.
When you see that there's property missing, you start to lean towards it being a robbery.
Hopeful that someone may have seen the shooter, police start going door to door.
This was a highly populated area, and people were always coming and going.
And it doesn't take them long to find a witness.
One of the neighbors told us that they heard a gunshot.
I was in bed when I heard a loud bang.
She was absolutely sure it was 3:01 because when she heard the shot, she looked at the cable box and saw it was 3:01 a.m.
She ran to the window to look, but she didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so she didn't call the police.
Okay.
The woman's statement doesn't help them identify a suspect, but it does give them a timeline. Now they can look to another kind of eyewitness.
There were several cameras in that area, and detectives hope they caught something. But it takes a long time to collect all that video, process it, and review it.
In the meantime, detectives head back to the station to talk to Diana's mom, Leonida.
She was extremely devastated.
Have you gotten any updates from the hospital?
She just went to surgery. They said it could be a couple of hours.
So before she goes to be by her side, Diana's mother has agreed to walk them through the events leading up to her 911 call.
She said she last saw Diana the night before.
In the early evening, she returned home and then later went out with some friends.
Do you know who? No. I think she was with her girlfriends.
Leonida says she got a phone call from Diana later that night.
She said, I'll be home maybe around 1 or so.
After that, Diana's mother says she went to bed, expecting to see her daughter in the morning.
But her mother wakes up and realizes she's not home.
That's when she went looking for Diana and found her clinging to life.
How will her mother ever get that memory out of her head?
Can I go to my baby now?
Before they let her go, detectives need a little more information on Diana's personal life.
Was she seeing anyone? Nothing serious since she returned from Florida.
Diana's mom explained that she'd been back in New York for a couple of months and reconnected with her ex, Luis, but they weren't exclusive.
So she wasn't out with Luis last night?
She said, no, not that night.
We appreciate you coming in. I'll walk you out.
When Diana's father shows up at the station, he's just as shocked about what's happened.
Diana's father and mother were separated. Now,
So after Diana's mother found her, her brother showed up at the scene and then went back to her father's house and told her father.
There wasn't much anyone could do at the hospital, so he come to the station to help them find out who did this.
he was just trying to give us as much info as possible.
I can't believe it. I just saw her yesterday.
Could you tell us more about yesterday?
He said she went over probably about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
He told them that her ex-boyfriend, Luis Altaret Rivera, was staying with him, so he was there too.
So you're close with this young man?
Of course, he's part of the family.
Luis did things for me. He'd take him to a doctor's appointment, he cooked for him, he cleaned the house.
And Diana didn't mind this friendship?
She and Luis are still close.
They kept the relationship very cordial.
A lot of people thought they were going to get back together.
But like Diana's mother, her father has no idea who would want to harm her.
The dad assumed it was a stranger, the robbery.
When detectives sit down with her ex, Luis, he agrees.
They'd gotten his number from Diana's dad, and he was more than happy to come in.
When she parked her car, he's very dangerous. I even gave her a mage, not to know who.
This was looking more and more like a random crime, but law enforcement always wants to start with the victim's inner circle and then move out from there.
Luis confirms to detectives that he and Diana were still on good terms.
And you and Diana never had any problems? Never had any problems. No? Nothing physical, anything like that? Never.
He was very polite, very cooperative and cordial.
However, he does admit to being shocked by the way Diana ended their relationship.
He thought she was going to stay with her sister for a week vacation in Florida.
She told me she was going for 10 days, and she never came back. That was surprising too.
It also raises a red flag for the detectives.
Maybe he hadn't accepted their breakup.
Did you want to get back together with her? I would have loved to.
Luis was still in love with Diana.
But he knew she felt differently.
She don't want to have a serious relationship. They will still have sex, but not like seriously, you know.
Luis tells detectives that he respected her decision and eventually realized it was time to move on.
He said he started dating and seeing other people as well.
I have a girl. Not like wife, but like girl, friend.
And so did Diana.
Did she have other friends or no? No, she go out with females.
Diana was exploring her sexuality.
Diana was dating, and she met a woman, and she was in love.
The first suspect that most police officers look at are an intimate partner.
If she'd found out Diana was seeing Luis again, that could be a motive.
As Diana Casado undergoes emergency surgery for a gunshot wound to the head, her ex-boyfriend, Luis Altaret Rivera, has just told Yonkers detectives that he'd heard she'd been seeing someone new.
He said she met a woman and she was in love.
But that isn't the only rumor Luis shares with detectives.
They broke up, I don't know, something happened with her.
Could Diana's new love interest be responsible for her death?
You need to consider people's motives. Could be this overwhelming jealousy of, a fear of losing Diana.
Of course, the fact that Diana was seeing someone new could also give Luis a motive.
How did that make you feel? I didn't care because we didn't have a serious relationship.
To prove it, Luis tells them he was with his new girlfriend in the Bronx on the night of the shooting.
What time did you go down? It was like 1.
They went in the car talking for a little bit, and then he told her, hey, let's go to Yonkers. Diana's father bought me a bottle of rum from DR.
He then drove to the father's house, and then he brings her back down to the Bronx.
They sat there, drank a little bit, and then she said she had to go, and he went home.
I got home around 5 something. In the morning? Yeah.
Luis insists he has nothing to hide.
He gave his consent to search his vehicle to see his cell phone. We swabbed his person for gunshot residue.
And when the detectives follow up with his new girlfriend, she confirms everything he's told them.
His girlfriend in the Bronx was like, yeah, he was with me.
He had nothing to do with this.
It's a setback for the investigation. One that's made even worse when the detectives receive a call from the hospital.
Diana was taken off of life support, and she passed.
Anxious to find her killer, detectives waste no time tracking down their next suspect.
They were able to find the girlfriend's name through Diana's social media.
She was a young lady named Angelica.
But when Angelica shows up for her interview, she seems confused.
Can I ask what this is about?
I explained to her that Diana had been killed.
What? Oh my God.
She seemed really caught off guard.
Angelica tells them she'd had plans to see Diana the night before.
They were supposed to go out, but she ended up staying at work. They didn't meet up.
So wait, you two weren't broken up? No, definitely not.
When was the last time you two talked?
It was last night, a little after midnight.
Diana was out at a bar.
She was with her friend Ricardo.
Just a friend? For her, yeah.
Angelica thought Ricardo wanted more, but she didn't think Diana would ever go for it.
We had a good thing.
When detectives follow up with her supervisor, Angelica's alibi seems to check out.
She was working and it was a distance away. We knew it wasn't her.
Ricardo White is now detectives' best lead.
He was the last person seen with her.
We were able to locate the gentleman to interview him.
Ricardo White?
Yeah. What's this about?
He was completely shocked to hear what had occurred.
Ricardo tells detectives that when he last saw Diana, she was very much alive.
We went to a bar, hung out for a little while.
She's having a good time, she's dancing, having a couple drinks.
At about 2:30, he walked her out of the bar. She got into her car, she drove off.
Ricardo claims he doesn't know where Diana went next. But is he telling the truth?
And how would you describe your relationship with Diana?
Just friends.
Were you looking for more than that?
I mean, I want to say no. But she was with Angelica.
To the detectives, he seems genuine.
He was very helpful. He said, whatever you need from me, I will help. But I had nothing to do with this.
Requesting the surveillance footage from the bar confirms Ricardo's story.
It's Ricardo.
In the video, Diana is clearly seen leaving the bar at 2:30 a.m.
You see them on video walking to the car, then you see him coming back.
He's going to head to the club for approximately an hour thereafter. And that would put him in the club long after we believe she was shot.
Which means the investigation has now come to a standstill.
It's frustrating. You feel like you owe the family an explanation.
Take a seat, please.
But a meeting with Diana's brother is about to change the course of the investigation.
He wanted to talk to them about Diana's ex-boyfriend, Luis.
I know my dad loved the guy. He didn't know everything.
He said, you know, he was very controlling.
You wearing that?
Yeah.
Put this on.
She couldn't do anything on her own.
Junior made sure to let police know that if anyone was capable of doing this to his sister,
What's this?
it was Luis.
Less than 48 hours after Diana Casado was murdered, her brother Junior has just told Yonkers detectives that they should be looking at her ex-boyfriend, Luis Altaret Rivera.
He saw him as someone who wants to be able to monitor Diana's every move.
He said Luis controlled everything that Diana did. He controlled what she wore, what she could buy, where they would go.
You wearing that?
Yeah.
Put this on.
It's a classic sign of domestic violence.
Put it on.
He saw her as an object. She was property to him.
He's got to be looked at for this crime.
However, the facts suggest Luis couldn't have pulled the trigger.
The gunshot residue testing they conducted on Luis came back negative. And they confirmed his alibi for the night that Diana was killed.
I'll walk you out.
At Junior's insistence, detectives decide to take a closer look at Luis.
Junior didn't know all the ins and outs of the couple's relationship, but he said one of Diana's oldest friends, Camilla Rhodes, would know more.
Called down to the station, Camilla seems just as convinced of Luis's guilt.
What her brother told you, that isn't the half of it.
She admits that when Diana first met Luis, she was desperately in love.
The beginning of a relationship, everything's amazing.
But she says the couple's age gap soon created a dangerous dynamic.
Oftentimes what happens when you have an older partner in a relationship with someone significantly younger, there is grooming that happens with the younger individual.
Luis molded her into the person that he wanted her to be, which was almost like a little puppet.
And by the time they moved in together, Luis had full control over Diana's life.
He didn't work. He made Diana cook, clean, everything.
She paid the rent. He just lived off her and sucked her dry.
And over the years, his controlling behavior became even more extreme.
He would drop her off at work and watch, make sure she didn't speak to anybody.
After her shift is over, 8 hours later, he would take her home.
He was trying to dominate her every minute.
I thought it was crazy, but I didn't want to step in the middle of their relationship until I saw the bruises.
It's ridiculous, man. Wait. Diana, what's this? It's not a big deal.
Camilla urged her friend to get help, but Diana was too afraid.
She said, I'm not going to get an order of protection because that's going to really set him off.
You need to tell someone. I don't get it. He'll hurt my family.
He had threatened to do harm to Diana's mom, Diana's brother.
Imagine the burden that she had to carry.
However, Camilla says that after nearly a decade together, Diana began plotting her escape.
She told Luisa she was going to stay with her sister for a week vacation. She intends to set up permanent residence.
She was cleaning the slate and starting a new life down there.
Unfortunately, Diana's fresh start wasn't what she bargained for.
He soon follows her down there.
Did he find her?
No, but he was looking.
He didn't know where she lived.
He was trying to get the address, but she wouldn't give it to him. But he continued to call her.
This guy just would not leave her alone.
Convinced she'd never find peace in Florida, Diana eventually moved back home.
He found her, and the same cycle continued.
She was afraid to tell him no.
They started seeing each other once in a while.
It was to keep him happy, just so he didn't, react or harm her family.
But Diana had refused to stop living her own life.
She met a woman, and she was fond of her.
It was overwhelmingly happy for her, like just being with this new person who made her feel good and didn't tear her down. She was ready to just embrace whatever came forward.
But Camilla fears that Diana made a fatal mistake.
She had a conversation with Lewis 2 days before she was killed. She basically told him it's over. I'm not going to be with you. I'm never going to be with you.
I tried to stop her. I didn't think it was a good idea.
She told Diana, you might be signing your own death sentence.
It's over!
Yonkers police now know that nearly everything Diana Casado's ex-boyfriend, Luis Altoret Rivera, told them about their relationship was a lie.
There was a big disparity in the way Luis described the relationship and how other people described it.
It wasn't a good relationship.
This guy is abusive.
Which makes detectives wonder, did Luis kill Diana?
Luis claimed to have been with another woman, and this other woman vouched for him.
However, his phone records tell a different story.
He told police he was with his new girlfriend from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. on the night of the murder, but his phone showed he was still texting her at 3 a.m.
If you've been sitting together in a car or anywhere else, why would you be texting?
His alibi's not adding up.
When detectives follow up with Luis's girlfriend a second time, she quickly cracks.
She soon realized that we knew more than she thought.
And at that point, she's like, no, you wasn't with me that early.
He had told her to tell the police that they were together from roughly midnight till 5 a.m. When in truth, he spent about an hour and a half with her, from about 3:30 to maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Detectives aren't surprised when she explains why she lied.
She was afraid that she would end up like Diana Casado if she didn't say that he was with her.
Even with Luis's alibi proven to be a lie, Detectives have no hard evidence that he shot Diana.
We needed a physical evidence.
But they end up with something even better.
A few days after the shooting, police finally received the results from their video cameras.
I was in bed when I heard a loud bang.
Our ear witness told us she heard a gunshot right at 3 o'clock. 2 minutes after that, we have Luis walking on video about 100 yards from the location. Further, we have him carrying on his back a purse.
When he gets down the hill, there is a dumpster right around the corner.
He dumped her pocketbook and its contents into the dumpster.
He closes it and he walks down the block.
It's the smoking gun detectives have been looking for.
There was little doubt in anyone's mind that Luis was the suspect and the murderer.
There's just one problem.
He was no longer anywhere to be found.
Days go by without any sign of Luis.
His cell phone went completely dark.
They couldn't find him. He was basically on the run.
When police break the news to Diana's family, they're furious at Luis's betrayal. But no one is more shocked than her father.
The father didn't know any of the stuff that was going on with Luis, his daughter. He didn't know how he was mistreating his daughter.
Eventually, Yonkers police recruit the help of the FBI to track Luis down.
They helped us with tracking his cell phone. He was all over the place. Connecticut, Florida. But by the time you get to that location, he's no longer there.
He seemed to always be one step ahead.
More than a year goes by without an arrest in Diana's case.
Being patient is very difficult, especially when you know who your suspect is.
Then finally, in March of 2018, they received new information on Luis's whereabouts.
Miss Benjamin.
He went to Puerto Rico to his father's house.
Once again, he's managed to slip away. But this time, he's left a sickening trail.
We found out that there was actually a girlfriend in Puerto Rico who was murdered 13 months after Diana was. And he's a person of interest in that case.
Her name was Ilia Milan Melendez.
He got a phone call one day from his uncle that she was at a bar and she's drunk. He comes over to the bar and forcibly drags her from the bar, puts her in his car, and that's the last she's seen.
She was found nearly decapitated in a shallow grave by a beach.
I mean, this guy he's a psychopath.
In the aftermath, Luis had disappeared again.
How long can this go on? It became that much more important to not leave him free for any longer.
Then, in February of 2019, investigators get the break they've been waiting for.
We were able to get a new cell phone number for him. He's in Vancouver, Washington.
He knew we had to move quickly.
We got on a plane and went out there.
It's time. Let's grab him.
This was payback on a whole nother level.
Cold-hearted, bone-chilling revenge.
If you're going to seek revenge, make sure you dig 2 graves.
Don't miss the season premiere of Payback. Next on TV One.
2 years after the murder of Diana Casado, Yonkers homicide detectives have followed their suspect's trail across the country to Washington State.
We found out where he was living. We went over, knocked on the door. He opened the door.
Put your hands up!
We explained who we were, why we were there, and asked, would you come with us? He said, sure, no problem. He was very cooperative.
In an interrogation room, police present Luis with the evidence against him. He seems unfazed.
Look, Luis, we know you lied to us. Do you have anything you want to say?
Even after putting holes in his story. Luis didn't concede to being untruthful about his timeline.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
But in the end, his denials don't matter.
Let me see your hands.
We had enough to go and charge him with the murder.
Sit tight.
They had made arrangements to have him extradited back to New York.
For Diana's family, news of the arrest lifts a weight from their shoulders.
It was very emotional for Detective Geis and I to be able to tell the family, hey, we got him.
And on May 23, 2022, when Luis stands trial, the prosecution doesn't hold back.
They said this crime was cold, calculated, and fueled by Luis's jealousy and his need to control Diana.
She told Luis that she was in love with a woman and that was it. Like, she was done with him and she was gonna move on.
That was the tipping point.
He took that as a sign of disrespect, like, who do you think you are?
So in the early morning hours of January 22, 2017, police believe Luis contacted Diana and asked her to meet him.
She did agree to meet him.
We have very good evidence that Diana picked up Luis around 2:45 in the morning.
We have video of her car actually going towards the direction where he was living. And then it comes back. And it looks like there's two people in the car.
And then we were able to follow her car on camera, and she parks it out in the parking lot shortly thereafter.
All right, Luis, what is it about?
Her guard was down. She was expecting a conversation, one of the many conversations that they had had before.
But Luis was planning something else.
They started arguing about the relationship.
Diana, I love you.
No, this isn't love. I can't keep doing this with you.
When Luis realized it was finally over, he pulled out a gun.
To show that he is still in control, he did something that ended it all.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
For the jury, there's no question who ended Diana Casado's life that night.
The jury came back less than 2 hours and convicted him of the second-degree murder.
When they said guilty, it was such a great feeling.
1 month later, Luis returns to the courtroom for sentencing.
Diana's mother was able to make a victim impact statement.
She spoke from her heart, and she broke down. Her family broke down in the audience.
She begged over and over, why? Why did you take my beautiful daughter? And there was no answer. The judge rendered his sentencing, which was 25 years to life.
Diana's family was so grateful that finally he was going to pay for what he had done. Now he's away. He can't hurt anybody else.
We were able to do it. We were able to give him justice.
But for Luis's other alleged victim, justice remains out of reach.
There's another woman in Puerto Rico who also was killed.
My understanding is that they still are actively working the case.
I'm hoping for the victim's family in Puerto Rico, the same thing happens.
Either way, Luis will spend his life behind bars, while his victims' memories will live on.
I remember her mother telling us, I just thought she would be forgotten. And we were like, no, we're not gonna forget.
It's a story that needs to be told.
If you find yourself in a relationship that is unhealthy, then it's important to share, to not keep this just to yourself.
Domestic violence happens way too often. Don't wait till it ends up this way. Do not be afraid to speak up.
Abuse is never okay.
My kids, they'll never know who my father is. That's the part that hurts the most.
She was awakened by her husband screaming out her name.
and he was on fire.
Revenge is based on an unsatisfied feeling within yourself. I need you to feel what I feel. And the only way that I can get you to feel what I feel is to hurt you.
You just keep hurting each other, hurting each other, hurting each other.
You have to be able to control that impulse that's inside of you. And if not, this is the result. On December 14, 2006, in Newark, Connecticut, 911 operators received a frantic call that there was a fire.
When the paramedics and police got there, they found something a little strange, something completely different from what they expected.
Rather than a house engulfed in flames, they find a man struggling to back out of the driveway.
The victim was observed operating his vehicle, trying to take himself to the hospital. He was in a lot of pain and in shock.
He was severely burned over the upper torso of his body. The police didn't understand how this man was even functioning at this point.
The burns were terrible. You know, they were from his chest all the way to his knees.
He seemed to be delirious and incoherent, but what they could clearly make out, that he said he woke up and he was on fire.
The first priority is going to be to take care of the victim and make sure the victim gets medical attention and gets to the hospital.
As first responders attend to the man, 3 other people emerge, explaining there's no active fire inside. One identifies herself as Mary Ann Langley. She says the victim is her husband, 55-year-old James Langley. The people with her are her niece and nephew, who live next door with Mary Ann's sister. All 3 are shaken, unsure of what happened, and worried about James.
James Langley was born and raised in Farmville, North Carolina. He was a typical Southern young man. He grew up riding his bike, fishing. He was one of 8 siblings.
My brother James, he was a nice guy. He was competitive. Anything he was doing, he wanted to be competitive. He and I used to do everything against each other, if you want to look at it that way, and laugh about it afterwards.
James and his brothers learned at an early age that the way to get what you want in life is to work hard.
As a child, we would get up, 5:30 in the morning, work 12 hours a day. We knew how to run any kind of machinery or tractors and animals or whatever the case may be. We could do it, We were used to working and working hard.
In the late 1960s, James's older brother, Willie, moved to Connecticut, seeking new opportunities.
My father and them, they seen how my uncle was doing. And when he was coming back with the cars and the nice clothes, and he said he wanted to leave and come live with my Uncle Willie so he can make a better life for himself.
James came from North Carolina probably in our junior high school years. James was a country boy at heart, very likable character, full of life. We did car racing together, illegal drag strip racing, and then that plus our time in school and young ladies that we were involved in at the time, we became pretty close friends.
At 18, James got married to his high school sweetheart and went to work for the Connecticut Department of Transportation.
My father married my mother, Barbara Coleman, when she was 18. My father worked at the Department of Transportation. He started off cutting grass and getting roads ready when they were cracked up, putting the seal in the cracks. And then he moved up to be the foreman.
James had 2 sons. That would be James Corey Jr. and Terrence. And they were basically less than a year apart.
Unfortunately, James's dedication to work didn't leave room for much else.
He would work from sun up probably to sundown, and then, you know, his wife would be angry. He'd come home and just flop down on the living room floor to watch TV, and that would be the end of his day. And she'd be yelling around the house, you know, you're out there, you're doing too much. And he eventually got divorced after about maybe 7 or 8 years, and he moved on.
James was determined to be a great father, and he made sure his boy stayed very close to him.
Though James had been divorced once, he never gave up on love. One day, at his son's Little League game, he met Marianne Stokes.
Marianne was from the South originally. She was a kind-hearted lady. She was a churchgoer and family-oriented.
Marianne had a relationship. She got married, and through that marriage, she had a son named Daryl. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't work out for her. So meeting someone like James was pretty something she was ready for.
He had just gone through a divorce, and he was going through some things of his own, I guess, with being alone. You know, they just became a couple, and it worked out, and they went together for quite a while.
In 1981, Marianne and James decided to get married. So the blended family, her one son, his 2 sons, they all became one cohesive group.
Mrs. Langley really loved her husband. She loved him very much. She cooked for him. She cleaned for him. He was a diabetic, and she really took care of him.
He was a great cook, and if you went in that house, there was food within arm reach anytime you went there. They were big eaters. You know, we were country people. We all were country people, and we all cooked. So we did it big, I tell you.
Family life was going well, but James realized his hard work wasn't being recognized at the Department of Transportation.
After a number of years of being passed over for promotions, James decided to start his own landscaping and paving business in 1988.
James was extremely competitive. He wanted to win at everything he did. So when it came time for him to open up his own business, he went full force. The same way he put in that work for other people, he decided to put the work in for himself.
James enjoyed being his own boss and providing Marianne with a comfortable life. But most importantly, he wanted to set a good example for his sons.
He would have his children work with him. He would take them out on jobs with him, show them how it's done, so later on that they could, you know, be enterprising young men themselves.
Most of the time, he wanted us to be out there working when we was, instead of out in the street having a good time. He tried to plant a seed that you got to work for. In order to get what you want in life, you're going to have to get up and you're going to go to work and go get it.
Because the business was flourishing so well, James was able to invest in real estate properties. He had rental properties, commercial properties.
He wanted to get bigger, and he had other dreams of selling out later on to stockpile finances so that he would be comfortable.
It resulted in a quite comfortable lifestyle. By the time they had reached their late 40s, they had amassed an estate worth well over $1 million.
On December 4th, 2006, James celebrated his 55th birthday and finally started thinking about retirement.
He was rambling on about leaving and going to move, sell everything, or take the equipment and I should just move back to North Carolina. So I said, well, if that's what you want to do, then let's do that. Let's just pick up and go.
Now, it seems he may never get the chance. 10 days after his birthday, James is rushed to the emergency room. While doctors struggle to stabilize James Langley at a Norwalk, Connecticut hospital, detectives speak with his wife, Marianne, to find out what happened.
When the investigators initially interviewed Marianne, she was quite distraught. Marianne said she had fell asleep in the basement and she was awakened by her husband screaming out her name.
She said that she saw the kitchen light off and the sparkling of fire.
She was terrified and unsure what to do.
She panicked and ran next door to her sister's house and began frantically banging on the door to try to get some assistance, and that's when they called the police and the ambulance.
She really did not offer any explanation as to how what happened to James could have happened.
Authorities combed the house for evidence, led by Fire Inspector John Lumba. For him, this is no ordinary investigation. He has a personal connection to the victim.
The case was very difficult for me, basically because it involved human life, and it involved a friend that I had known for many, many years. But I couldn't allow that to, sway an opinion or anything. It went strictly by evidence.
It was apparent that the fire was contained to one area of the house.
Investigators, upon looking into the master bedroom, they see that there's burn patterns on a carpet.
There were droplets of burn patterns, but it wasn't a consistent burn. It wasn't a big pattern burn. It was just droplets that had ignited at some point and it went out. And you could say there were droplets because they were very small. They looked like teardrops on the flooring.
One of the odd things was there was no fire on the bed at all. Nothing on the bed was singed or burned.
The fact that the bed itself wasn't half burnt would indicate that James was not asleep in bed when the fire occurred.
The fire investigator found that odd because James had mentioned earlier that he woke up on fire, and they thought that how could he do that if there were no burn marks there?
The next thing you look for is the ignition source. What caused the heat buildup to create a fire? So you're looking for wiring, you're looking for a candle or something like that. James was not a smoker. There was no cigarettes, there was no lighter. Where the fire was, there was no ignition sources.
So was this an accident or something more sinister? Investigators find more clues in the kitchen.
There's matches, a pack of matches with a single burnt match on the edge of the counter.
I couldn't absolutely say that that was used to ignite because sometimes when you have a gas stove, which they did at the time, sometimes when you have a bad pilot light or a bad burner, people use a match to ignite that burner to continue their cooking.
Also found that the garbage can in the kitchen was a solid, heavy plastic cup. It was lying right on top of the garbage in the garbage can, which would indicate that it was relatively freshly put there. Also, it had a strong odor of residue gasoline in it, which is what you're smelling throughout the house. So it would kind of be indicative that that was used to transport the gasoline.
They find a similar piece of evidence left just outside the back door.
On the top of the garbage can, there was a white styrofoam coffee cup that had just, the bottom had been disintegrated. And that's what happens when you pour something with acetone, gasoline, or acid in styrofoam.
When I saw the melted cup, I kind of recognized what was going on. Gasoline will go through a styrofoam cup probably in about 30 seconds.
If someone filled the cup with gas outside, it wouldn't have lasted long.
By the time you got back to the house, you'd have basically a burnt through cup, which would explain why it was discarded.
Evidence seems to point that James Langley had been intentionally set on fire, but there was no evidence of any forced entry into the home. So the question really is, who struck the match?
The morning after a fire gravely injures James Langley, investigators still have more questions than answers. So they ask his wife, Mary Ann, to come in for another interview.
The first time they talked to her, she was very distraught. This time she came in pretty calm.
This time when they asked her, did she have any idea how did this all come about? She said she did.
Marianne began to tell them that James had been diagnosed with type 2 adult diabetes, and he wasn't really taking care of himself, according to her. She wasn't taking his meds, and that might have led to what had happened.
Why don't you start with last evening and go through again what happened?
In my interview with Marianne Langley, she related that at around 8:30, they started slumping and also had urinated on himself, which she knew or believed to be diabetic in nature.
I said, your sugar must be up real high. I said, Langley, I said, I'm going to take it. So I did. And I said, Langley, your sugar's 594. And then I said to him, listen, you got to go to the hospital.
After some convincing, they decided to go. Once they arrived at the hospital, the emergency room was a little crowded, and James decided he wasn't going to get out the car. He didn't want to be involved in all the people that were there. So James insisted that Marianne drive him home.
He was still not doing well and had a hard time taking off his clothes.
She was very upset with him, and they argued a little more about James not taking care of himself. At that point is when she decided she was going to sleep downstairs because she just couldn't reason with the man.
Marianne says she fell asleep in the basement bedroom. Shortly before 5 a.m., she woke up to the sound of her husband shouting.
I hear him screaming for me. I was screaming. I said, what? I went running. I said, what? Oh, God, when I see this bucket on the fight, I ran out the door. And I run to my sister's back door, screaming.
She didn't see the fire start, but she thinks she knows what happened.
Marianne said that she believes that James woke up in a disoriented stupor and probably set his cell phone fire. James had frequently come home with the smell of gasoline on his clothes from different jobs that they do. So the gasoline being on him is not too far-fetched. Because of the condition that people suffer from being in a diabetic haze where your numbers are so high, the detectives had to at least consider James setting himself on fire was a possibility.
Marianne says that after calling 911 from next door, she returned with her niece and nephew and found James delirious and making wild accusations.
I asked her, well, what was he saying? She basically, well, he was hallucinating, he was crazy, he didn't know what he was talking about. And when I asked her, well, what was he saying? She said, well, he said that I lit him on fire, which wasn't true.
Marianne couldn't believe that he accused her of something of that nature. Why would Marianne spend her time taking him to the hospital, arguing with him, trying to convince him to take better care of himself if she was just going to turn around and set him on fire?
He was hallucinating, you know. Why you trying to kill me? I said, what are you talking about? I was, crying and screaming, and it was terrible. It was terrible.
If somebody goes into shock, is it very possible that they're not aware of the here and now conversation and their thought patterns? Yes.
If Marianne had harmed James, why would she volunteer the detail of James's accusation? Investigators also ask her about the matches and cups they found.
She explained that she uses matches to light the pilot on the stove when it doesn't work automatically, and that's why that was there. The thick plastic cup, she said it was a daily use cup.
Are your fingerprints going to come back on that cup?
Oh, yeah, I use the cup all the time. That cup was in the sink last night, okay? That cup.
Marianne said they used the styrofoam cups for their daily coffee, but she doesn't know why it would end up in the back door unless James did it.
My brother knows not to set himself on fire. I mean, it can happen, but he dealt with stuff like that every day. He dealt with diesel fuel, gasoline, all kinds of oils.
It was very difficult for me to believe that my father would go get gasoline to set himself on fire.
Only one person knows exactly what happened, and unfortunately, he's lying in a hospital room, unconscious.
He had burns, reportedly about 40% of his body, on his abdomen, backs of the arms, hands, and they were 2nd and 3rd degree burns, which are very serious.
When I went to the hospital to see him, they had sedated him so that he wouldn't hurt himself, because he would get delirious, in his sleep from the burns and so forth and so on.
They had to take him to surgery and do the skin graft. It was maybe a 50-50, 60-40 chance that he lived, so I just could take that answer, and there was nothing I could do. And my father sitting in the hospital, going through the pain that he going through, and now I might not have my father back again. So that was the hardest part.
In the days following James Langley's hospitalization, Norwalk police interview the rest of his family, starting with his niece and nephew who lived next door.
During the interviews with both of them, they reiterated what Marianne Langley in her interview had alluded to, which is that James was accusing her of lighting him on fire.
He says words to the effect that, "I know who did this to me. It was your aunt. She did this to me. She poured the liquid and she lit the match."
They tried to explain to him that the ambulance was already on its way and the police had been called. But he was so out of it that he just kind of ran out the door, got into the car, and tried to drive himself.
The niece and nephew's story strengthens the theory that James was delirious. James's other statement that night suggests more confusion.
He'd already indicated to the police that he woke up and he was on fire. And it's sort of hard to reconcile the fact that somebody can observe his wife pouring liquid on him and lighting a match when he was asleep.
Authorities asked the niece and nephew about the couple's relationship and get some surprising information.
James and Marianne had continued marital problems. In fact, it was common knowledge that James had an ongoing affair.
The affair began in 2004 when James was hired to build a wall on the property of a woman named Sylvia.
She came over to start speaking to James about it, and one thing led to another, and they became very interested in each other very quickly. She put some light back into his life that he had lost in his marriage, and the relationship quickly escalated into something romantic.
Understandably, Marianne was very upset when she learned of the affair.
I know that Marianne somehow got wind of this particular relationship, and she went in the driveway with the van, and the wall was there that he had built, and she kind of rammed the wall with the van. Things just got worse after that.
It turns out the relationship with Sylvia was just one of many affairs James had over the years, and the infidelity set off a vicious cycle in their relationship.
He wasn't happy at home, and so, he ran around. He ran around and she would catch him. And every time she would catch him, they go through a thing for a minute, and then they go stay together. I did hear her rumblings, but she was upset when I come around. I'm gonna leave your father. Okay, fine. If you're gonna leave him, okay, fine. There's nothing I can do about it.
About a year before the fire, Marianne got fed up. She had had enough. She decided to file for divorce from James.
But within a few months of Marianne trying to file for divorce, she dropped the divorce proceedings, and Marianne came back and said no, she wants to work it out with her husband.
On December 20th, 6 days after James went into the hospital, investigators interviewed James's mistress, Sylvia, to get her side of the story.
She said that James had been unhappy in his marriage for a while, and when they met, She happened to give him a safe space to come when his married life was more turmoil.
Sylvia details what she thinks started that turmoil.
She explained to the investigators that money was really the source of their marital problems.
Marianne was a kept woman, and kept women are scary because when they're put in a situation where they might lose their lifestyle, they get desperate. They just weren't happy with each other, but he was holding out, she wanted more, and it was like, money is not a big deal if you're not happy.
But there's more to Sylvia's story about Marianne.
She's a happy gambler, too.
Because of Marianne's gambling, James decided to cut her off from the joint bank account. That led to money mysteriously ended up missing from around the house, from the office. This became a serious problem for James.
It was a repetitive cycle. One goes and does something, and the other one feels like they're going to do something to hurt the other one.
That was, I think, the final straw that made him make his decision that now was the time. I'm through with it, with the relationship.
According to her, James and her felt a sense of relief when Marianne finally filed for divorce. They thought it was over, that he would be finally done with her. But then she withdrew the case, and things went back to exactly the way they were before. The reason that Marianne stayed in the marriage is because she knew she would be better off financially staying with James than leaving him.
Sylvia explains that James had gotten Marianne to sign a prenuptial agreement.
If a divorce went down, she, because of the prenuptial, wouldn't have access to the business.
Sylvia also offers another crucial piece of information, something James said less than 48 hours before he was burned.
Let me ask you this, coming into Christmas, was there any indication or pressure or anything said to him that you...
The only thing coming into Christmas that he had said to me, and I don't know what it meant, was, oh, yeah, I know you don't think I'm doing anything, but you're going to be real surprised. And I just looked at him and said, whatever, because I've been listening to this for 2 years and I ain't seen nothing yet, as far as him getting a divorce.
This is a huge revelation for the investigators because this meant that Marianne now had a motive to commit murder.
After James Langley was set on fire, the results of an analysis of the burns on his body provide an important piece of the puzzle. The burns suggest whoever threw the gasoline on James was aiming for his genital area.
The pattern that was on James was more or less, he was protecting himself by putting his hands and arms down to protect his genitalia. That's why the burn pattern was on the back of his hands and his arms.
It was indicative that he was standing and that gasoline was thrown at him.
So the question that needs to be asked is, did Marianne intentionally set James on fire as payback for his affair?
Investigators think she did, and they believe the styrofoam cup left outside was part of a first attempt to do so. When the gas ate through the styrofoam, she switched to plastic to finish the deed. On December 22, 2006, 8 days after James's attack, Norwalk police once again questioned Marianne Langley.
There's a lot of things that when we discussed things on Saturday, there's a lot of things that turned out that you told me that I, to be honest with you, have reason to question the validity of it, okay? And yeah. I asked you how the marriage was going and were there any problems or anything else, and you answered me, no. I said, is he seeing any other women? I don't think there's any other...
I said I didn't know.
Well, you did know, because you went over her house.
I hadn't been over to her house in years.
Marianne agrees to take a polygraph test to prove her innocence, but the results are inconclusive. The police officers have no choice but to let her go home.
Investigators' best hope for finding out what really happened is to speak with the victim, James Langley. But 12 days after the incident, that hope is dashed.
I got a phone call. I need to get to the hospital. Here, and crying in the background. So I got in the car and I flew to Bridgeport Hospital. We just stood in the room over top of him for a long time, just staring.
James passed away on December 26th at night. He went into cardiac arrest, and they fought feverishly to save him. And, I waited out in the hallway, and they was unable to save him.
That was the tough point. They just told me that, he fought as long as he could. That happened the day after Christmas. Christmas will never be the same for me. I try to make it the same, but it just won't never be the same.
The ruling of the autopsy was that it was a homicide based on the burn patterns and the severity of the burns, the location of the burns.
That's when the investigation really went into full force. I didn't want to think it was Ann. I think being around her for 25 years or so, it didn't dawn on me that she could have did such a thing as they were saying that could have happened,
There was only two people in the house, her and my father. So at the end of the day, that's the only two people that know exactly what happened that night. I really believe is that she just wanted to hurt him because he'd been hurting her.
Corey has no proof, but in the days following his father's death, he does tell investigators about some suspicious things Mary Ann has done with the family business.
She tells me there is no money, but that's a lie because I just gave her a check for $3,000.
All right. But she's not paying you.
She hasn't paid. She's paid me once since my father's been gone.
Mary Ann wasn't explaining at all where any of the money was going.
We had a rock wall job going and a landscape job going. And next thing you know, we got a phone call saying to bring the bulldozer back. So I was like, what's going on? I'm asking questions. This is Mary Ann says, you got to bring all of the machines back to the yard. And she sold the dump truck.
He also indicated that Mary Ann was trying to sell off both the business and the vehicles to the business.
In the prenup, she got nothing to do with J&L Lawson.
She never did run the business. She just proceeded to sell off assets.
Investigators believe that she killed James in order to get control of the money and to get back at him for having an affair. On March 29, 2007, the police finally come knocking on Mary Ann's door and arrest her for James's murder.
She was aware that she was a suspect and going to be arrested. We arrested Mary Ann Langley at her home without incident. She was taken into custody, brought to headquarters.
But some fear it won't be quite as easy to get a conviction.
This case is not a simple open and shut case. Hey, somebody poured gasoline on their husband, lit him on fire. There are a lot of things that need to be focused on a lot more carefully.
On October 6, 2008, nearly 2 years after the death of James Langley, his wife, Mary Ann Langley, goes on trial for his murder.
Prosecutors framed the case where Mary Ann was this vindictive woman who was seeking revenge on her husband for cutting her out of the finances and also leaving her for another woman.
This all began, they say, because James told her that morning that he was leaving to retire to North Carolina, but not with her, but with another woman. They argue that because Mary Ann would not have gotten any of the money based on the prenup, James leaving Mary Ann would have left her destitute, and that enraged her.
Prosecutors argue that over the course of 2 decades, Mary Ann Langley had grown used to an increasingly lavish lifestyle. When James threatened to take that away and give it to another woman, she decided to take her revenge.
And the fact that it's seemingly threw the gasoline towards his genitalia speaks volumes.
The defense presents a different theory, based on Mary Ann's initial statement.
There wasn't any magic science behind this. It was gasoline that clearly was the accelerant in this case. The question has always been, how did it ignite? Who set him on fire? One of the main aspects of the defense was James Langley probably did this to himself. It was an accidental burning, and there was evidence to suggest that. James Langley's condition lent itself to the possibility that he actually poured gasoline in the cup so that he could drink it. And while that sounds a little far-fetched, we had an expert witness, an endocrinologist, testify that his condition, which was such that one of the symptoms that he would have exhibited was a massive thirst. When she was asked on the stand whether or not somebody in Mr. James Langley's condition would drink gasoline, she said they would.
The jury finds Mary Ann Langley not guilty of murder, but they do find her guilty on a lesser charge of first-degree manslaughter.
Once you take gasoline and you throw it on somebody and you light a match, there's only one intention at that point in time for me, because you could try to kill somebody. She just wanted to hurt him for all the hurt, the pain he put her through.
Mary Ann Langley initially faces 12 years in prison, but her sentence is contingent on one condition.
At this point, she was supposed to give an apology to the family. However, she was very arrogant with her apology. It really wasn't an apology at all. And I think basically the judge switched his decision right at that point and gave her the maximum, which was 20 years.
I think the ugliest part of this whole case is the revenge factor. We've all known women who have been scorned. We've all had breakups. We've all been through this before. Do we all go out and try to kill our partners? No. So at some point, you have to be able to control that childish impulse that's inside of you. And if not, this is the result.
It's okay to be upset about something. It's okay to hurt. But sit in it, figure out where it's coming from, right? And if it's not healthy, get rid of it. And then move forward and have a happier life.
I don't believe in revenge, so you never get revenge. Two people are just going back and forth, hurting one another. This is basically what you're doing. Nobody never gets revenge. It's just a repetitive cycle. You can't prosper off other people's pain. My kids don't get to know who my father is. My kids have kids now. I got 7 grandkids. They'll never know who my father is, or get an opportunity to run around the yard the way we had an opportunity to run around the yard. That's the part that hurts the most.
Has struggled through a life of emotional abuse and psychological setbacks.
Ashley's upbringing was one that was kind of doomed from the beginning.
But when she finds a boy who brings balance to her world, she'll go to the ends of the earth to keep him.
It was a terrible scene, like something out of a horror film.
She was willing to do anything to make sure they were together.
And later in Inkster, Michigan, following a series of family tragedies, Darlene Binyard is desperate to fill an emotional void.
Darlene was always looking for that strong male figure in her life.
But when true love comes knocking, it'll open a terrifying door she should have kept locked forever.
Loving each other that much and doing what they have done is disgusting. They were ride or die, and we're in it until the end.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. Surrounded by crack houses on the dark side of Birmingham, Alabama, Ashley Jones's moral foundation was destined for destruction.
You're in a housing projects community. There are a lot of folks that are there. They're low income, and a lot of times there is crime associated with that. So she has a lot of these things happening around her.
In addition to the troubles outside the walls, there's plenty of evil lurking within her own family.
Her father was very temperamental, and she didn't have any role models because both her parents had their own issues.
They didn't resolve conflict through talking. They fought.
According to Ashley, when she's not watching her mother suffer emotional trauma at the hands of her father, the girl, as well as her sister, fall victim to the tyrant's wrath.
Get away from me! Her father once held her, her mother, and her sister at gunpoint, and he actually shot at a car that they were riding in.
Just recklessly unloads firearm into the vehicle. So this definitely was detrimental.
Despite the severity of her folks' repeated actions, no charges are ever filed, as the couple chooses to live their tempestuous life under society's radar.
They really didn't see bringing the law into it, because it was just their way of life.
As Ashley grows up, the extreme conditions wreak havoc on the girl's psyche, manifesting into trust issues and leaving her with a jaded sense of right and wrong.
I just thought it was extremely tragic for this young lady. She had no chance for a better life. She was doomed.
It's tough enough to grow up and deal with the changing emotions and hormones and all of those things that are part of getting older and evolving. But to grow up in such a turbulent sort of environment, that will have a lasting, devastating effect on one's life.
As time passes, Ashley's mom makes the decision to leave her husband behind and remarry.
It got worse because the man who then came into the picture pretty much replaced what the old husband did, and you have Ashley who is continuing to see this destructive behavior.
It started to affect her mental health. She would sometimes laugh to herself, talk to herself. She was paranoid.
Her inability to fit in quickly makes her an outcast and causes the reclusive ninth grader to seek out a fatal solution to her problems.
She was taking prescription medication to overdose.
Once that didn't really work, she attempted to cut herself. That landed her in the office of the psych counselors who diagnosed her with chronic depression.
For some people who cut themselves or try to attempt suicide in general, well, they may be trying to deal with some strong emotions, intense pressure, upsetting relationship problems. Sometimes it's something as simple as relief from bad feelings.
Instead of being put on medication, she and her sister are shipped off to live with their grandparents, DeRoy and Mary Knowles, as well as her Aunt Millie, who also lives in the house.
Her grandfather was very loving. He was a church man. I think they called him Deacon Knowles. He was a deacon in the church.
Sometimes seeking a new living situation or environment may be exactly what the doctor ordered. However, that new situation might make us more vulnerable to being isolated and lonely.
With her mental issues left to run rampant, the now 13-year-old walks through life scared and alone. But when she meets a boy who keeps her grounded, her mind is finally put to rest. Living just around the corner from Ashley, Jeremy Hart is streetwise beyond his years.
Jeremy is handsome, and he's very boastful. He's sort of a tough guy in the neighborhood.
And when the two are introduced at an after-hours party, they form an instant connection.
He loved the way she looked. He thought she was very beautiful, and he had a lot of confidence, and that attracted her to him.
After getting to know each other, Ashley learns the teen has never been in trouble with the law, but not for lack of trying.
He gloated to Ashley about intimidating people in the neighborhood. So for Ashley, at first she was taken aback by it, but she saw that as a sense of security, somebody she could confide in.
Though according to Jeremy, that's not the only heat he's been packing.
He bragged about his sexual prowess. He wanted to impress Ashley. So he probably puffed himself up a little bit.
He also had a child at 15 years old, so he was sexually very experienced, and Ashley liked that.
Although she's taken aback by Jeremy's hardened exterior, she's never been more vulnerable and longs for male attention. So in the weeks that follow, the two lost souls become joined at the hip.
And he says he loves her. That's something she's been lacking all of her life. And so they were with each other. They were inseparable.
Scientifically speaking, hormones do influence behaviors. So it's not at all atypical for a person who may not have the best character to appear to be attractive, moral, or even fun, especially to that young person going through those hormonal changes.
The welcomed affection causes the teen to let her guard down, and soon she not only loses her virginity to the more experienced lover, she loses all self-control.
Ashley was seeing Jeremy a lot, even driving her to skip school, sneak out of the house, which started to cause a little bit of rift with her grandparents who she was living with at the time.
They did not like Jeremy at all, period. They felt that Jeremy was a thug, street hoodlum. They did not want him interfering in Ashley's life. They were very, very strict on her.
When the restrictions become too much to bear, the girl grows desperate to break free of her household ties.
She didn't want to go to foster care. She didn't want to become a ward of the state. She wanted to be with Jeremy.
And when the couple maps out a macabre way to make that happen, the impressionable teen is all in.
Jeremy and Ashley tortured that family.
She was willing to do anything to make sure they were together.
In Birmingham, Alabama, troubled Ashley Jones has finally found love in 15-year-old Jeremy Hart. Unfortunately, her grandparents don't approve and forbid her to see him.
Get out. Sometimes the allure of doing something that you're not supposed to do can overshadow right from wrong. And for young people especially, to buck those rules, well, that excitement is overwhelming.
Enraged that they're being kept apart, Jeremy and Ashley come up with a plan where they can both truly be free together.
Jeremy told Ashley they need to get rid of the grandfather, her aunt, her grandmother, and her little sister.
They all lived in the house, and they were all pretty much instrumental in some form or fashion in keeping her away from Jeremy.
To do so, Ashley agrees to steal some of her grandfather's guns so they can make the murders quick and clean. When they're finished, they'll rob them and cover their tracks by any means necessary.
And they were going to burn them up, get rid of the evidence, whatever was needed so that they could move on and go live their free life.
Ashley is on board with the disturbing idea and soon realizes if she wants to be with him, no one can stand in their way.
If Jeremy told Ashley to jump off of a cliff, she probably would have done it at that point because she loved and trusted him so much.
Scientifically, we know that the brain doesn't mature until someone's around age 25. So before then, you're going to see young people do whatever they want, whatever they feel, no matter how foolish it happens to be.
With the stolen guns in hand, Ashley gets to work, creating a solution to ensure any evidence they might leave behind will go up in smoke.
She mixed lighter fluid, nail polish remover, and rubbing alcohol together. Something that would be very flammable.
Armed and ready, the duo sets their plan in motion on a sweltering August evening.
It was a Sunday night. The family is sort of moving about throughout the day as they would any normal Sunday. By Sunday evening, the family is sitting around in the den watching television.
Ashley is monitoring her family. Everybody is in the den, including her grandfather, her grandmother, her aunt, and her 10-year-old sister, Joanna.
Around 11, her loved ones finally settle in.
Grandmother had went to sleep, the aunt went to sleep, and so did her sister. And so she was just laying around, relaxing. And her grandfather started to nod off while watching TV. And that's when she hit up Jeremy to come over, and she snuck him in.
Jeremy, with his red bandana around part of his face and gun in hand, he went inside the house and approached DeRoy Knowles.
Without hesitation, Jeremy raises the gun and shoots her groggy grandfather in the head.
Miraculously, he didn't die instantly. He actually stumbled towards the kitchen and collapsed on the ground.
Next, the pair goes upstairs to Millie's bedroom, where Jeremy unloads 3 bullets into the unsuspecting aunt.
Ashley actually saw that Millie was still breathing. When Jeremy told her, finish the job, grabbed these portable heaters, and they started beating Aunt Millie with the heaters.
Meanwhile, in the next bedroom, Ashley's grandmother has awoken and comes to see what all the commotion is about.
Jeremy!
The first person she sees is Jeremy with this red bandana concealing part of his face, but she does recognize him.
Using his final bullet, Jeremy fires at the frail matriarch, striking her in the shoulder and leaving her for dead.
They scrambled downstairs, and that's when they discovered that Ashley's grandfather was still alive.
And Jeremy started beating Ashley's grandfather with everything he had to try to finish him. But before he killed him, he asked where was the money. He needed money.
Where's the money?
He told Jeremy that the money was under the mattress and they found $300.
With loot in hand, the couple no longer has a use for DeRoy and decides to finish him off.
Jeremy grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Ashley's grandfather in the throat 2 times, and then he sliced his throat open.
Ashley took her concoction and poured it over the grandfather and lit him ablaze.
Research suggests that children who have been involved in parricide, which would be the killing of parents or grandparents, tend to fall into 3 categories. One would be severe mental illness. The second would be very dangerous antisocial behaviors. The third would be victims of physical and/or emotional abuse. But to light someone on fire, well, that takes that to a whole new category.
The fire on his body rages, then quickly snuffs out as DeRoy lets out a final dying groan. A noise that triggers a wounded grandma to muster her energy and lurch downstairs.
She staggered over to her husband and tried to save his life.
And so that's when Ashley went over and just started to repeatedly stab the grandmother.
With most of the family believed to be dead, Ashley covers the rest of their bodies in her handcrafted fire starter and lights the fuse. Just then, a tiny figure appears. It's 10-year-old Joanna, and she quickly makes a break for the exit.
She tried her best to get out of there, but before she can reach the door, Jeremy grabs her.
Pulling out a different and fully loaded gun, Jeremy presses the barrel directly against his hostage's temple. And later, in Inkster, Michigan, Darlene Vineyard gets a hard lesson in love when she lets her man steal more than just her heart.
If Dewan said this is what we need to do to be happy, then Darlene was all in.
She believed in him, and ultimately, that's what caused her to commit these crimes.
According to Ashley, when she was just a young girl, her mom asked her to stab her own father so it would look like an innocent accident. Fortunately, the toddler disobeyed.
Perhaps this was the mother's way of getting rid of the father by using a child, because a 3-year-old probably wouldn't be arrested for it.
Ashley Jones and her boyfriend Jeremy have just brutally ambushed some of her family members in their Birmingham, Alabama home. But when the presumed lone survivor, her 10-year-old sister Joanna, makes a break for the door, Ashley enters the fray, ready to sever her family ties once and for all.
Ashley began stabbing her sister 13 and 14 times. One stab wound punctured her lung.
It's ironic because initially Ashley was kind of like her guardian to some degree. And For her to turn on her sister and attempt to kill her, that just spoke to how strongly they were trying to be together at no cost.
As the child collapses on the ground, the murderers assume they've done her in. Little do they know, wounded Joanna is savvier than they ever imagined.
The sister played dead. I think she knew that there was not going to be many ways out of this situation.
For a 10-year-old child to be able to think so quickly is nothing short of a marvel. So to call her courageous would be an understatement of epic proportions.
With the job believed to be done, Jeremy tells his girlfriend it's time to move on to phase 2.
He instructed her to find towels, bed sheets, paper, to make this fire where they could set it ablaze and bring the whole house down.
After dousing the items and lighting the fuse, the couple quickly makes a break for the exit. Once outside, they steal her grandparents' Cadillac before heading to a nearby hotel, where an older friend has rented them a room to hide out.
Once they got to the hotel, it was almost as if nothing happened. Their plan, went off without a hitch.
They have no idea that back at the smoldering crime scene, some signs of life are rising from the ashes.
Miraculously, her grandmother came to, and her baby sister Joanna noticed this.
She pulled herself up, she grabbed her by the hand, and led her out of the house.
After escaping, the preteen leaves her woozy grandma safely on the porch and bravely treks through their desolate neighborhood for help.
So here you have a 10-year-old walking down a dark road, stabbed in her face, her stomach, and eventually a car does stop and takes her to a convenience store, and that's where she calls 911.
Police and firefighters quickly arrive and extinguish the blaze. But when they step foot inside, it leaves them with more burning questions than answers.
What they find is a slaughterhouse.
They see the grandfather laying there on the floor with those stab wounds.
They go to the bedrooms and they find Aunt Millie is dead in her bed, still with the heater on top of her body.
While investigators secure the scene, EMTs do everything they can to save the 2 living victims.
Ashley's grandmother and her sister are taken to 2 separate hospitals. Her sister is treated for multiple stab wounds as well as a collapsed lung.
The grandmother was burned over 35% of her body from head to toe, and she ended up staying in a coma for about 6 weeks.
While Joanna recovers, police hit her up for answers as to who was responsible for this heinous crime. And they're floored by her response.
My sister, Ashley.
She told them that it was her own flesh and blood and her boyfriend that did this to them.
Meanwhile, in the nearby hotel room, the felonious couple spends the night partying and watching TV. But when a breaking news alert flashes across the screen, the festivities come to a screeching halt.
They thought they had finished off everybody in the house. So when the news report came on and she saw that her grandmother survived and her sister, she was quite disappointed.
And Ashley said under her breath, "I thought I killed that bitch."
Assuming police are hot on their heels, the lovebirds lay low in their rented room until morning. But when the sun crests over the horizon, investigators are right behind it.
The police actually found Ashley's grandfather's car sitting in the parking lot of this motel. So they knew they had to be inside.
They talk with folks there. They figure out which room Ashley and Jeremy are in. They go in, they apprehend them, they take them into custody.
In separate interrogations, the young lovers show no regret as they make full confessions about their involvement in the crime.
In some couples, we see lying as a way to exhibit solidarity. But on some rare occasions, we see young couples who may engage in these sorts of behaviors, feel justified in them, and wear it as a badge of honor.
With their stories on the books, Jeremy is charged with 2 counts of capital murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. His woman is arrested on the spot and charged with the same.
Before she was taken away, Ashley asked the detectives,
"Before you go, you just tell Jeremy that I love him."
to tell her boyfriend that she loved him.
Following their respective trials, Ashley and Jeremy are both found guilty on all charges.
Despite them being juveniles, they both received life in prison without a chance at parole.
And only when handed her fate does the teen finally exhibit signs of remorse for her deplorable actions and getting involved with a boy like Jeremy.
Ashley saw Jeremy as sort of her savior. That's how he acted with her. He was saving her from this terrible life that she had been living. So she felt that Jeremy was her ticket out, and she took it.
It's clear that Ashley was on this high with Jeremy, who was providing her all the things she had never had. And you put that with a person in need, and there you have the perfect mixture of evil that ended up coming about between the two when they carried out this heinous crime.
I truly believe that children aren't born evil, that perhaps they are victims of very dysfunctional circumstances. My only hope is, as they face their punishment, that somehow they can have that corrective emotional experience to somehow be productive citizens in the future.
Ashley's future crashed and burned when she let the boy of her dreams rake her through the coals. In Inkster, Michigan, loving single mother Darlene Vineyard learns that the right man can light up your life, but also bring a world of darkness. Although things haven't been easy for Darlene or her 7 loving brothers and sisters, the beautiful 16-year-old is determined to make sure her story is a happy one.
She just enjoyed spending time with her friends. Like, the one thing she really enjoyed was writing. She loved writing. She loved poetry.
The teen's parents recently started a new chapter by moving the family from the rough and tumble streets of Detroit, Michigan, to more peaceful Warren, still within the city limits. Unfortunately, trouble comes along with them.
They didn't have a lot of money. They were looking for a better life. Even though the environment was more quiet, they still were struggling financially.
As the Vineyards watch the bills pile up, Darlene does her best to keep an eye on the family's oldest son, Albert, who's battling with sickle cell anemia.
And that required round-the-clock care. And of course, being such a large family, it definitely put a strain on them.
There was a lot on her, being a young woman and a female within the family, so she took on a lot of those roles.
Long-term medical issues can mean a lifetime of personal and financial obligations. And the fact of the matter is, not everyone is willing to put the needs of a sickly loved one in front of their own happiness.
Though when it rains, it pours, and the family is dealt yet another blow when Albert succumbs to his disease.
He had a bone marrow transplant, and the new bone marrow he got attacked his lungs, and he just couldn't take it anymore.
To rid themselves of any bad memories, the family moves yet again, this time to neighboring Inkster. But Mom still struggles to cope with the loss, leaving Darlene desperately looking for a shoulder to lean on.
It kind of rocked her world, and that's when Dad kind of stepped up and he became the rock of the family and kind of helped pull them together.
But their bond is tested once again when Dad dies unexpectedly, leaving Darlene to pick up the pieces of her shattered heart.
It was really hard. It was out of nowhere. Out of nowhere.
To lose a loved one is so devastating, especially as you're watching them die over the years. But then to lose another loved one in a short period of time is even more devastating and can have lingering effects over a lifetime.
As time goes on, the siblings stay close, but leave the nest to go their separate ways. Unfortunately, after a series of failed relationships following high school, Darlene feels more alone than ever.
She had 2 children at 20, so she was trying to find her way, but still she did not have that partner that I think most of us look for.
Darlene was daddy's girl, and she was still looking to fill that void, to fill the love that she had in the relationship that she had with her father.
That is, until she meets a man who takes hold of her heart and shepherds her down a path of greed, violence, and deceit.
Going into someone's house is always a huge risk, but after all, this is the man she loves.
Doing what they have done is disgusting. It was like Bonnie and Clyde to me.
recreate the love and companionship lost by her father's death. Single mother Darlene Binyard is fighting for emotional survival in Inkster, Michigan.
The effects of losing a parent can last a lifetime, and a vulnerability that we feel now puts us at risk for lowering our standards in people who may not be healthy for us.
But when a sibling introduces her to Duane Crawford, she finally feels whole again.
He was living down the street from her sister. So when she goes to visit her sister, there he is right in the neighborhood.
After exchanging pleasantries, Darlene can instantly feel herself being drawn in by the 22-year-old's charm and charisma.
He was funny, he liked to joke around.
They chatted it up and found out that they had a lot in common.
Like Darlene, Duane has also faced his fair share of struggles and is trying to piece his life back together.
He, too, was dealing with the loss of his grandmother, and so I think they shared that loss in common, and it hit them hard.
Tragedies have a way of bonding people together. Not only is it a conversation starter, but it is something that now can make us accelerate what we feel for one another romantically.
The story is more than relatable to Darlene, and she's quick to offer a shoulder to lean on.
They seem to genuinely care for each other, and it seems like he did find a kindred spirit in her.
As time passes, the twosome finds themselves growing attached at the hip.
She loved the fact that he was a protector of her, and he loved the fact that she was so loyal and devoted.
They would not let go of each other, and I knew this relationship was different. Y'all really love each other.
Over the next 4 years, the couple's love continues to flourish. Their part-time jobs allow them to afford a modest apartment on the edge of town, where they eventually welcome 2 beautiful children.
They had dreams not only for themselves as a couple, but they had dreams for the children as well. So they were on the right track.
Though the walls of their perfect world begin to crumble when Duane secretly decides to trade their financial stability for a 5-finger discount.
He broke into a neighbor's house and got caught trying to steal a TV and gaming console.
Up until now, Duane's had no prior brushes with the law, which is why the now 25-year-old Darlene is so appalled when her man is charged with second-degree home invasion and spends the next year and a half in prison.
And that was very difficult on Darlene. They were already struggling, but now you add the fact that he's gone and she has to take care of that family completely on her own.
It's easy to overlook the misdeeds of someone that we may love. We see what we want to see, but if we adore that person, then we will stay by their side no matter what it is they do.
Once he's let out on parole for good behavior, Duane is determined to turn his life around for the sake of his family.
He thought that he would be able to pull things together and make a clean start of it, but they had money problems and things got so bad that they ended up being evicted from their home.
They sent their children to live with more stable family members.
Displaced and alone, the pair desperately searches for a new home sweet home. And when they stumble upon an abandoned house, they decide to lay down the welcome mat.
They was squatting in the house, and they was there for a year, so they had squatters' rights. She had it nice and neat and everything.
Not only do the new digs offer the couple freedom to do as they please, it's a place to lay low from the government's prying eyes.
She picked up a drug problem, and because of their living conditions and the fact that their children weren't living with them, they were being investigated by Child Protective Services.
I think that it was just the toll that things had taken on them because they had been through a lot. They were down, they were out.
Instead of scrounging money to find a more suitable place and possibly get their children back, the unmotivated couple spends the next few months spiraling deeper into dissent.
The drugs was that more important than our family, the kids.
That's when the couple discusses a surefire way to feed her needs.
Rob some houses.
They decide to start breaking into homes as a way of earning some quick cash and putting some food on the table.
Desperate people do desperate things, and when you hit rock bottom, it is so easy to take that illegal road to get to where you want to be.
Darlene is initially hesitant, as she's always tried to live on the up and up.
But in the end, if this is what they need to do, to be a happy family, to get our lives back on track, makes me believe Darlene was all in.
So in the wee hours of a September morning, Duane walks to the nearby town of Westland, setting off a terrifying chain of events which leaves police baffled and residents of their quiet community deadbolting their doors.
I don't think you can ever really forget when someone points a gun in your face.
Her love for him outweighed everything else.
Barely scraping by on the streets of Inkster, Michigan, Darlene Vineyard and her boyfriend, Duane Crawford, have come up with a plan to put some easy money in their pockets. The ride-or-die couple is going to find random houses to rob and decides to start their spree in nearby Westland.
When things aren't going our way, it's really easy to lose sight of our moral compass and get involved in activities that are illegal, abhorrent, or just plain wrong.
For their first heist, Darlene waits at home while the more criminally experienced Duane takes the reins.
I think he wanted to show her that he could do this.
He walks about 3 miles and finds a house that is easy to break into.
He cut the screen out of the rear kitchen window, got into the house. He grabbed a purse off the table and some cash, credit cards, and bolted out, never even seeing anyone. It was a piece of cake.
After returning to his woman, the couple uses the pilfered earnings to splurge on some basic human necessities.
And that goes back to showing you just how poor they were and how they were struggling.
With the success of the first robbery, it's not hard for the couple to try their luck again, a few nights later in Garden City, 3 miles away. Only this time, he wants her to tag along.
Before, she had just sat back home and waited for him, but now she's an accomplice. She's with him to do this dirty work herself.
They quickly spot a home with no outside lights, dogs, or security systems. And Duane forces his way inside, through the locked front door, though he's shocked to see the aging homeowner waiting for him.
It took him off guard because now he's faced with a decision of what do I do with this person who's in this house?
So he forced the elderly man into a back bedroom, and Darlene stayed in the living room.
A few minutes later, Duane emerges with a handful of stolen goods, including keys to the man's vehicle.
They took his gun and took his car that he worked hard for. He has a family that cares about him. How dare you do this?
And that changed everything because now they're not limited to where they can get to on foot.
The rattled but uninjured homeowner dials 911, reporting the attack as well as his stolen Impala, while the robbers quickly flee, relieved that no one got hurt.
What if that man killed you? What if y'all killed him? It would have been tragic.
Police take the man's report seriously and promise to be on the lookout for his stolen ride. Meanwhile, it's just before 6 a.m. when Duane suggests they strike again, this time in their hometown.
They go back to Inkster and they pick this particular house. Again, he kicks in the front door.
After holding the female homeowner at gunpoint and swiping her laptop and some credit cards, the duo quickly vanishes back into the night.
And then they headed to the car, loaded the stuff in the car, and they were out of there.
When they leave, the woman calls police and she reports what happens.
Investigators add her complaint to the growing list of troubling reports as the couple continues their felonious spree in nearby Westland.
And they were looking for houses that didn't appear to have a security system, didn't have lights on, no cars in the driveway. If it was unsecured, then they would go inside.
Only this time, a family is just beginning their day when the duo creeps in through an unlocked side door.
They were getting the kids ready for school and getting ready to get to work. And so it certainly caught this family by surprise and off guard.
Holding them at gunpoint, Duane demands they hand over their wallets. And as the family trembles in fear, they realize their fates rest in the hands of Duane's itchy trigger finger.
You have no idea what this person is going to do or what they're capable of.
I can't imagine what they went through. Their lives are not the same.
Before he turned to a life of crime, Dewan was determined to make something of himself, and even studied heating and cooling at a local trade school.
I wonder how things would have been if he would have completed school, if he would have stayed on his job. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten in all this trouble.
Darlene Binyard and her man, Dewan, are holding an innocent Westland, Michigan family at gunpoint. Their latest targets in a string of robberies.
Your life is probably flashing before your eyes. Your heart's racing. You don't know if you're going to die at this point, and you very well could.
So when Dewan threatens to pull the trigger if they don't hand over some cash, they have no choice but to give in to the madman's demands.
No one was hurt. They got away with their wallets and their bounty for the day and headed back to the getaway car.
To rob houses is one thing, but to hold people at gunpoint? Well, that's not only a lack of self-control, but in my opinion is selfish, monstrous, and shows a complete lack of responsibility.
Not pressing their luck anymore that day, the couple heads to Dewan's unwitting aunt's house to hole up and count their booty.
They were kind of just reveling in the success of their robberies.
They're at a point of no return. They're not ready to stop. They're ready to keep going.
It was disgusting, and it broke our hearts, because we would never think that she would do anything like this, and we weren't raised that way at all.
There's a school of thought that looks at crimes being some sort of a self-medication. In other words, people get involved in it in order to feel better about themselves.
Unfortunately, when they head to Inkster to strike more houses the next night, they hit an unexpected roadblock.
The car that they had stolen from the elderly man in Garden City ran out of gas. So they left the car right there on the side of the road and walked back to Dewan's aunt's house.
Little do they know, police have been on the lookout for the vehicle ever since it was reported stolen, and an officer spots it while on routine patrol.
And inside, Dewan leaves critical evidence for the police to tie these robberies to him. He leaves behind a prescription bottle with his name on it.
So that gave him a name to look up this person in the system. And when they did that, they found out that Dewan was on parole and that he had served time for, guess what? Home invasion.
And that's not all. After contacting his parole officer, they learned Dewan recently had a baby with his girlfriend, Darlene. And according to records, every time social workers came knocking to check in, they received no answer.
Dipping and running from CPS and all that, it was just crazy.
Detectives have always had a hunch that all three break-ins are connected.
They had the same MO, and they were all committed within a 5-mile radius of each other.
And now that they have some suspects, they work feverishly to track down Darlene and her man.
It was difficult because they were living in an abandoned house, but they certainly have family ties. Any address associated with a family member would be investigated.
6 days after the crime spree ended, the police show up at Dewan's aunt's house, and they have a warrant.
But the second Dewan sees them coming, he decides to save himself instead of sticking by his woman.
Dewan all of a sudden tries to run out of the house, and of course that was not gonna work.
Darlene tells investigators she's not sure where Dewan is, but when they scour the property, they quickly locate him hiding in the backyard.
They were able to catch him and put handcuffs on him right then and there.
When we're looking at signs of guilt, we typically look at avoidance, excessive emotion, even body language. When you're running away from the police, well, then that is the sure sign, because that is as guilty gets.
When the dust settles, detectives find several stolen credit and identification cards throughout the house, as well as the Impala's vehicle registration in Darlene's purse.
At this point, Darlene and Dewan are caught red-handed. They're charged with first-degree home invasion, 4 counts of armed robbery, and felony possession of a firearm.
Not wanting to try her luck with a jury, Darlene pleads guilty and is sentenced to 8 to 20 years. Her man follows suit, pleading guilty to armed robbery and felony gun charges, earning him 17 to 40 years.
She made her bed, she has to lay in it, and those were her choices, not ours.
Behind bars, Darlene expresses incredible remorse for her actions. but not for getting involved with Dewan, who she says will always be her soulmate.
I think Dewan is the person that filled that void that she was looking for after losing her dad. But guess what? You can make a decision that says, yes, Dewan, I love you, but Dewan, we should not be together, and move on. She did not make that choice.
She's very sorry. She apologized to each and every one of us. She writes letters and tells us that she's so sorry about everything that had happened. And she's grateful that they didn't kill anyone.
The tragedy here is that you have two people who came from solid backgrounds, but yet somehow fell prey to the dark side of life. And not only did they lose their freedom, but now there are 6 children who are going to grow up not ever getting to know their parents.
Hello, hello, hello. Anh em đồng bào theo dõi trả lời. Và mình sẽ vô từ em Friend và hai anh em. Vô. Mà tôi chẳng biết chữ cái này. Vô. Ủa, chết này. Chết thật. Phải đến server này có bao nhiêu người nha. 2 nha, thằng đúng không? Thầy biết hết 2 thằng là top 1. Trời ơi, trời, chúng ta bắn nhau đây. Kẻ thành công là kẻ biết tận dụng thế. Hôm nay nghe đạo lý. Đúng vậy. Và thầy sẽ tận dụng hết khả năng của thầy bạn. Đó sẽ là cái đấy, thầy bảo biết tận dụng lại thế là có mạng liền này. Cậu bé chết ngắt nha. Và thế là hết. Một vé lên bảng.
Biết rồi, cái con hồng thuốc lửa ấy, con này nó có khi người ta cáo thế con vào vận động là nó bị thiêu rồi à?
Thôi, nào nó bắn thầy. Nó giết mất thầy rồi. Để rồi xin lại thì giết lại nó này. Thầy cũng chưa kịp hồi máu nữa. Lên lắm vào.
Unstoppable!
Vậy sao?
Ai đây là chúng nó có play cái con bio này. Tuấn Anh, con bio của Duyên lại gần đấy. Xấu vai thì nhìn quê.
Sao? Đồ à? Đồ gì đồ à? Đâu nhỉ?
Rampage!
Tôi đã sợ tin ra của con cóc.
Killing spree!
Gì nữa chả. Sáng xịt thế này.
Killing spree!
Không biết phải có một cái đoạn chung. Ốt đây. Ok nha anh em. Không. Anh chơi game đeo cặp chỉ tớ cho em.
Không cần.
Còn mấy sao nữa thôi. Chẳng nghe để bỏ lỡ.
Anh còn bỏ lớp phút của em được nữa thì anh là gì?
Chịu rồi. Đấy chỉ một cái nó cao. Con anh đúng vậy. Quá hay.
Killing spree!
Tốt rồi. Nghỉ. Sắp được nghỉ rồi. Sắp phải nghỉ rồi. Biết nói gì ra đây. Gì ạ?
anh nói nhiều lắm rồi, người ta chuẩn bị rồi.
Ai rồi, khác thôi. Tính rơi giờ rơi thẳng vào đầu à. Hát cái gì trời. Máy. Người thật. Mà kiếm về máy. Cũng phải. Ai sẽ phải lấy cái bút đấy để gắn chim vào mình. Rồi ra vậy. Cái này sẽ tính là hoạt hình được hay vậy? Chúng ta mà tính là siêu anh hùng thôi. Ôi trời ơi. Xong rồi. Đây là sao? Bắt.
Killing spree!
Nhâm 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 nhâm. Tệ. Được rồi.
Killing spree!
Và đã đến hồi kết, chỉ lại 5 người chơi. Mọi thứ sẽ kết thúc sau vài phút nữa. Chịu rồi. Bây giờ không ai lấy luôn. XP 43 máu trong một phát bắn vào đó là chứng kiến chỉ còn lại 3 người chơi và thôi. Một người đang ở trong tòa nhà, một người đang đứng ở ngoài sau cánh cây, một người đang đứng ở trên. Và đó là anh em hát cho mình lên keo để đỡ. Ui, anh SVD khổ SVD. Và hiện tại có một người chơi vẫn đang ẩn thân ở đâu đó. Được rồi. Còn 3 người chơi thôi mà. Bắn nào. Được rồi. Ok, bye bye mọi người nha.